Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Jimmy Dore Show. I'm here with the miserable liberal and Ron Placone.
Things are going great.
Me too, yeah.
So let's talk about Yemen. What's happening in Yemen is one of the richest Arab states. Saudi Arabia has been bombing the crap out of it. And yet another Sunni Shia. Well, it's the Houthi forces. Well, here we go. I'll tell you what's been going on. In 2015, Houthi forces ousted the Saudi-backed Yemeni government led by President Abed Rabbo Mansour Hadi. And in the ensuing vacuum of the civil war, Al-Qaeda militants wrestled control over large areas in the south of the country. The war has killed thousands and displaced millions, with both sides accused of targeting civilians. Both sides? With air and port access limited, you know who's limiting the air and port access? The United States and Saudi Arabia. With air and port access limited and access to medical care nearly non-existent, famine and cholera have swept the country, leaving its population facing a humanitarian crisis on a scale not seen in decades. That's from the Washington Post. So we're doing that with our pals are doing it with the help of us. Our pals who? Petrodollar. Who's the petrodollar? Saudi Arabia, baby. Saudi Arabia. So we just sold $100 billion or so worth of arms, which is a continuing. This isn't new that Trump did. This is continuing what the United States has always done. And so we're backing Saudi Arabia, which exports terrorism all over the Middle East, a very extreme brand of it. And they've been almost committing genocide in Yemen. They got the naval, like they said, they got the naval blockade and port with an air and port access limited. We didn't order the right port from this catalog. What do you mean? Why is it limited? Of course, the Washington Post is never going to tell you the truth about what's really happening in war, okay? Just so you know that, when you go to the Washington Post, they don't tell you they're in bed with the Pentagon and the CIA. Jeff Bezos sits on a board for the Pentagon and has a $600 million deal with the CIA, which I'm sure is probably more now. So that's what's going on in Yemen, one of the poorest countries. And by the way, we used to sell cluster bombs, which is considered a war crime by the whole world, except for us, because we made them here. Up until last year, we used to manufacture and sell cluster bombs to Saudi Arabia, and then they would drop them on fishing villages in Yemen, and you wonder why. There's a humanitarian crisis on a scale that hasn't been seen in decades. Famine, cholera, no medical care. Why? Because the Saudi Arabia has an air and naval blockade. We're helping them do that. We're doing that, again, to poor people. We did it to Iraq. Remember we did it to Iraq? Remember when Madeleine Albright said, if you got to kill 500,000 kids in Iraq, it's worth it. We're doing it again. Here's a little bit more from the Free Thought Project. Thanks to the U.S. foreign policy, 7 million civilians are starving to death in Yemen, and 19 million are in need of some form of aid. At least 9.6 million children, which amounts to 80% of all Yemeni children, are in need of humanitarian assistance. 80% of all Yemeni children are in need of humanitarian assistance. And you know what the United States sends there? Do we send humanitarian aid? No, we send soldiers, bombs, and jets. That's what we send there. Nearly 2.2 million children are acutely malnourished and require urgent care. Close to 500,000 children suffer from severe acute malnutrition, a life-threatening condition that has seen a drastic... So, again, the United States does not give a crap about people, about starving babies or sick children or who got gassed anywhere. That's all propaganda. When Trump said, oh, the little babies that got gassed, it's all propaganda. They can't wait to kill babies themselves, which is what we're doing. Do you see what we're doing?
Yeah, if we actually gave a shit, we would do what Bill Hicks had the bit about, where we would use the technology we have to drop food to hungry
Right.
people. There's a
Right.
guy that needs a banana. That's what we would actually do if we gave a shit.
We could use a smart bomb to launch food at people who
Yeah.
are in need, or medical supply. Boom, there you go, diabetes medication. Boom, boom, there you go, antibiotics. Boom, boom.
Here's a banana drone. Yeah, I mean, totally.
So that's from the UNICEF report that nearly 2.2 million children are acutely malnourished and require urgent care. Close to 500,000 children suffer from severe acute malnutrition, a life-threatening condition that has seen a drastic increase of 200% since 2014. That's from UNICEF. Gareth Porter, an investigative journalist, historian, and analyst who has provided ample coverage of issues in the Middle East, wrote that the Saudi coalition, we're part of that coalition, has wreaked havoc upon Yemen civilians through a, quote, war strategy of maximizing pressure on the Houthi resistance by destroying agricultural, health, and transportation infrastructure, and by choking off access to food and fuel for most of Yemeni's population. We're doing that to them. We're literally choking off medical supplies, food. What the F? We're wrecking their agriculture and their infrastructure on purpose for Saudi Arabia. Petrodollar, baby, never talked about. Will never be mentioned on MSNBC, CNN. Have you ever seen the petrodollar mentioned in an article about this in the Washington Post or the New York Times? I've never seen it. At the same time, the United States has played a crucial role in enabling the Saudi strategy responsible for the crisis faced in Yemen today. And Gareth says, quote, the United States has enabled the Saudis to pursue the strategy by refueling the Saudi-led coalition planes bombing Yemen and selling the bombs. Equally important, however, the United States has provided the political diplomatic cover that the Saudis need to carry out this ruthless endeavor without massive international blowback. So we're supposed to be upset that Assad is a butcher and killing his own people. Meanwhile, we're helping Saudi Arabia literally create one of the biggest humanitarian crisis, where 80% of the people, children, lack medical care, are malnourished. And we're doing that. We're doing that to the poorest people in the region. We are doing that. The Trump administration has gone even further in supporting the Saudi strategy, whereas the Obama administration opposed the Saudi-led coalition offensive to regain control over the main port of Hodeida and the rest of the Red Sea coast, saying it would worsen the humanitarian crisis in Yemen. The Trump administration has clearly given the green light to the Saudis to launch that offensive.
There's your non-interventionalist. There he is. It's your non-interventionalist.
So Trump's a big fat liar when he says he's a non-interventionalist. Everybody had their fingers crossed, me included, that he would be a non-interventionalist, and he's not. Obama, he killed an 8-year-old with his raid in Yemen. Obama killed that girl's brother. They just hand off the baton to each other. You go kill a kid. You go kill a kid. So just so you know what's happening in Yemen, and the reason why I bring all this up is because just to prove to you once again that the mainstream news media will never tell you the truth about war, foreign policy, our military-industrial complex. Here we go. That's from the New York Times, tweeted this out. How did Yemen, a country under the close watch of the United States and Saudi Arabia, fall so swiftly into crisis? Wow. Why is one of the poorest countries in the world, who's also been devastated by the West, not doing so great? That's an actual question asked by an actual newspaper.
Yep. Sure
Hey,
is.
how did Yemen, a country under close watch meaning we bomb them when we feel like it? Is
Yeah,
that close watch?
I love that verbiage too. Close watch.
So, by the way, another thing that they don't, we're also supposedly fighting Al Qaeda in Yemen. We're literally supposedly fighting Al Qaeda in Yemen. So we've done over 80 bomb strikes since February in Yemen, the United States. And then which is bullshit that we're fighting them there.
Yeah, we do. There's a previous video we did a couple days ago about create a terrorist. We talked about that.
So the Al Qaeda are Sunnis. You know who else is Sunnis? Saudi Arabia. By the way, we are arming and training Al Qaeda, Al Nusra in Syria. So this is the New York Times. How did Yemen, a country under the close watch of the United States, close watch, as if we're there protecting them. What the United States is doing is bombing the shit out of them, killing innocent people, making sure that they can't get aid, medical care, food, or any kind of care that they need. Any kind of we're making sure that that country is going to be just as effed as Iraq was. And let's remember what Madeleine Albright said when we had an embargo on Iraq in the 90s. It was suggested that 500,000 children were going to be killed by it. And she said, well, if that's what it takes, it's worth it. We're doing it again in Yemen, and we're still people are under the impression, grown-up people in the United States are under the impression that the United States military is somewhere doing good. They ain't. It's not the soldiers' fault. It's this goddamn military-industrial complex, which every part of the media cheers on, except this part of the media, the independent media, the not bought media, the comedian media. MSNBC's not telling you this. CNN won't tell you that. New York Times just told you that. Look what the New York Times just said.
I don't know why things are a bummer over there. So weird.
It's so weird. I thought all those bombs that we sent just exploded with helpful tips on how to avoid humanitarian crisis.
Yeah, they just blow up and there's no cards in them.
Yeah, I thought the bombs blow up and pamphlets fly out and give you tips on how to treat your cholera. No, that's not what happens. So, if the New York Times reported World War II the same way, it'd be like, Japan's kind of a bummer right now. We have no idea why. So they caught so much shit for that online that they actually deleted that tweet. Just so you know, they're doing it worse than ever. They've never been good. They've always been horrible. They've always been in the pocket of the military-industrial complex. They've always been lapdogs to power. If Chomsky has taught you anything, he's taught you that the press in the United States, the free press, are lapdogs to power, and they always go along with war. Always. And here is the paper of note, the New York Times, pretending they have no idea what's going on. In fact, they're giving you the opposite impression. That somehow the United States and Saudi Arabia are trying to protect Yemen. We are bombing the shit out of Yemen on a daily basis. We are blockading, navally and airwise, we are blockading that country from receiving aid. We should be bringing aid to that country. Instead, we're not. We're trying to kill those people. Why? Petrodollar. Saudi Arabia, petrodollar. That's why. And the New York Times is again beating the drum for war. It's just amazing that they never lose reputation. No matter how many shitty things the New York Times or the Washington Post does, we still look to, people still say, you want to fight Trump? Get a subscription to the New York Times. This isn't fighting Trump. This is cheering that bullshit on.
Well, when you have an entire corporate media that's always inherently pro-war, that's always going to get a pass. That will always get a pass because it's just assumed at this point.
Yeah. And you wonder why people get their news from YouTube. Hey everybody, we have 2 live Jimmy Dore shows in September. September 25th, we're in San Diego, and September 18th in Burbank, California. Get your tickets right there. There's a link right there.